Welcome to today's devotional message from Trusting God Always. You prayed, you fasted, you waited, and still, silence. Maybe this message is the sign you didn't know you needed. If these words meet you right where you are, like, share, and subscribe. It helps us reach more souls who need God's comfort. Comment below with your favorite Bible promise, or the one you're still holding on to in the waiting. Let's begin and let His Word breathe new life into yours. You sit by the window, tracing patterns in the condensation, the chill seeping into your bones, mirroring a deeper coldness within. Another day ends, looking much like the one before, and the one before that. You've poured out your heart in prayer, laid bare your deepest longings, the promises you're holding on to, perhaps even the ones you feel God gave you. You've pictured the breakthrough, rehearsed the testimony, envisioned the closed door finally swinging open. But the silence is deafening. It presses in, thick and heavy, filling the space where an answer, a sign, a flicker of movement should be. The wind taps the glass, a rhythm that feels less like a whisper and more like the relentless tick of a clock measuring unanswered time. In this quiet, questions begin to surface, sharp little edges poking at the corners of your faith. Does He hear me? Does He see? Has He forgotten? Is this silence a sign that I'm somehow off track, or worse, not worthy? This waiting feels less like a pause and more like a wall, isolating you in a space of uncertainty and growing fatigue. The landscape of your hope feels like a barren wilderness, stretching out endlessly under a silent sky. You see others moving forward, celebrating answers, living the dreams you're still desperately praying for. Their victories are mountains you feel too weary to climb. Their answered prayers, like a river flowing somewhere you can't reach. Comparison, that thief of joy, whispers insidious lies, making the silence feel like a personal indictment, a mark of God's disapproval or disinterest. But somewhere, deep beneath the ache of unfulfilled hope, a tiny spark still flickers. A memory of His faithfulness in a past season, a truth you'll cling to, even when you don't feel it, perhaps a single verse, carried like a tiny seed in the palm of your weary hand. This message is for that spark. It's for the weary soul waiting, the heart that feels forgotten, the hands that hang limp from holding on too long. It's about the profound, often misunderstood, truth that God is not absent in the waiting. He is profoundly present, intricately working, even when the silence feels heavy and the door remains closed. Sometimes the quietest places are where His greatest works are forged, unheard by the world, known only in the heart. The wilderness wasn't empty of God. It was full of Him, training Moses and preparing a nation. The silence in the tomb wasn't the end. It was the pregnant pause before resurrection power exploded. Waiting isn't a void. It's a crucible where faith is refined, where the oil in your lamp is replenished away from the noise of hurried answers. This journey through waiting isn't just about the destination. It's about discovering who He is and who you are in Him, in the sacred, often painful space between the promise and its fulfillment. It's learning that faith isn't the absence of questions, but the courage to ask them in His presence. It's understanding that a hidden season isn't a wasted season. It is often the very ground where the deepest roots of trust are formed. Perhaps the healing you seek isn't just a changed circumstance, but a healed perspective, seeing God's hand even in the stillness. Maybe the strength you crave isn't physical might, but the quiet strength to endure, leaning entirely on his promises. This is an invitation to look again at the silence, not as abandonment, but as an opportunity to listen differently, to see with eyes of faith, to trust that the author of your story is writing a chapter of profound significance, even when you can't read the words yet. Rest your weary hands, lift your heavy heart, and know that even in the deepest quiet, you are seen, you are heard, and you are held. You remember the day, don't you? The air felt different, lighter, perhaps. Or maybe it was heavy with the weight of a possibility you'd never dared to entertain before. A word landed in your spirit, not necessarily a booming voice from the heavens, but a quiet conviction, a stirring deep within, a vision for what could be. It felt like fertile ground beneath your feet, ready to receive something precious. This was the moment the seed was planted, the seed of a divine promise. Consider Abraham, standing under a sky thick with stars, asked to count the uncountable. God had just called him out of everything familiar, leading him towards a land yet unseen, with a promise that defied all natural law. He, a man of advanced age with no children, would become the father of a multitude, as vast as the stars themselves. Imagine him, the dust of his homeland still clinging to his sandals, looking up at that celestial tapestry, each twinkling light a symbol of a future that seemed utterly impossible from where he stood in the present. The seed wasn't planted in convenience or certainty. It was planted in faith, watered by a word from God Himself. This initial word, this powerful promise, becomes the anchor when the inevitable winds of doubt begin to blow during the waiting period. It's the vision that sustains you when the path ahead disappears into the fog. Your own journey of waiting likely started with such a seed, a deep hope for healing in your body, a fervent desire for a family to nurture, a clear calling to a specific work that feels bigger than you, a longing for a breakthrough in a fractured relationship or a suffocating circumstance. You held this promise close, a tender shoot pushing through the soil of your heart. This is the crucial spiritual insight. God initiated the process. Your waiting isn't a punishment or an oversight. It is often a response to something He has already spoken or purposed for you. The waiting is simply the necessary season between the planting and the harvest. Sometimes, the deepest waiting isn't for the promise to arrive, but for us to grow into the people who can carry it. It can feel like a wilderness season, yet even there, hidden rivers of grace flow, nourishing the seed underground. When anxiety whispers that God has forgotten, lean back into that initial word. Revisit the moment the seed was planted. Let it remind you that the waiting is part of His plan, not an error in yours. Finding strength in stillness can be the most profound movement forward. The calendar pages turn, each flip a quiet echo of a promise still unseen. The initial spark, the bright certainty you felt when the word first landed in your heart, it's begun to dim. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months, and perhaps the seasons have changed so many times you've lost count of the years since you first whispered, "Yes, Lord." This waiting, it wasn't in the initial blueprint of excitement. It feels less like a confident stride toward Canaan and more like a forced march across a barren wilderness. The desert wasn't on the map you held in your heart. Think of them, the tribes streaming out of Egypt, dust on their sandals, the roar of the Red Sea miracle still ringing in their ears. They carried the weight of ancestral hopes and the immediate glory of divine rescue. A land flowing with milk and honey awaited. Yet they found themselves not in a swift journey, but a 40-year pilgrimage through shifting sands and stark horizons. They saw God's hand daily, clouds by day, fire by night, manna from heaven like morning dew. But the sheer duration of it, the relentless sameness of the journey, began to wear on their souls. They grumbled, they doubted, they looked back with a strange nostalgia at the very chains God had broken. The predictable misery of bondage started to look safer than the unpredictable freedom of the wilderness. This is the raw, unvarnished truth of the long wait. The ache of hope deferred can become a slow poison, silently eroding the foundations of faith if it's not anchored deep in God's unchanging nature. Maybe you sit in the quiet of your home, or stand at a crossroads in your life, and the questions rise unbidden. How much longer, God? My strength is failing. Or a more insidious whisper, did I even hear you correctly in the first place? Was that promise real, or just my own hopeful imagining? This prolonged season isn't just about God testing your patience. It's a divine design intended to refine your faith, yes, but also to expose the places where your trust is fragile, built more on favorable circumstances than on the unwavering character of the one who promised. He isn't intimidated by your questions, your frustrations, the weariness that settles heavy in your bones. He met the Israelites in the parched wilderness, spoke from the cloud, endured their complaints with steadfast love. He is with you right now in yours. The greatest act of faith in this moment might not be pretending you're strong, but daring to be honest. Bring your unfiltered doubts, your exhaustion, your aching heart to Him. He can handle the tremor in your voice and the tears you can't hold back. Surrender doesn't mean giving up on the promise. It means letting go of how or when it must arrive, and trusting the one who holds time itself in His hands. He is here, closer than the desert wind, waiting for you to simply breathe His name. The waiting feels like a heavy cloak draped across your shoulders. You watch as others stride forward, their prayers answered, their futures unfolding, while you remain anchored to the spot marked "Not Yet." There is a pain here, sharp and specific. It's the ache of explaining your situation again and again, the weariness of offering the same hopeful but strained smile when asked how things are going. It's the silent grief of milestones missed, of potential futures that remain stubbornly out of reach, while the river of life rushes past your stationary boat. You feel stuck, suspended in a frustrating, unmoving present. Consider Hannah, century after century, standing in the temple, her heart a raw wound. The sacred space offered no immediate balm. Year after year, she returned, burdened not just by childlessness, but by the active torment of a rival's taunts. Peninnah didn't just have children. She used Hannah's barrenness as a weapon, twisting the knife of her deepest longing. Hannah didn't just endure, she grieved the not yet with every fiber of her being. The scripture doesn't show us a stoic saint quietly accepting fate. It shows a woman pouring out her soul in bitter anguish, weeping uncontrollably before the Lord. Her pain was a torrent, a deep, personal sorrow that felt unending, tied to a specific, unmet desire she wrestled with in the very presence of God. 1 Samuel 1. This raw, honest portrait of Hannah tells us something vital about the waiting spaces in our own lives. God doesn't expect you to plaster a brave smile over a broken heart. He isn't asking for a performance of perfect composure. The waiting period isn't meant to be stoic or emotionless. It's a space where deep longings, genuine sorrow, and even bitter lament can coexist fiercely with faith. Your feelings aren't an obstacle to God. They are the very human reality He invites you to bring. Just as Hannah poured out her soul, you are invited to pour out yours. He collects your tears not as a record of failure, but as evidence of your trust, a testament to your vulnerability in His presence. He understands the depth of your longing because He is the one who placed it there, and He is compassionate towards the ache of the not yet. So, step into the quiet space within your heart and give yourself permission to feel the pain. Lament your situation to God. Call it what it is: the disappointment, the fear, the sadness, the anger. Your vulnerability in this sacred moment doesn't diminish your faith. It reveals your humanity, yes, but more profoundly, it reveals your absolute trust that God is safe enough to bring your messy, hurting self to. It draws you closer to His compassionate heart, reminding you that sometimes the greatest strength is found in the willingness to surrender your weakness to the one who is always strong enough. You feel the pressure build. The calendar pages turn, each empty space a silent question mark against the promise whispered to your heart. You've waited, you've hoped, but the silence stretches thin, and the future feels like shifting sand beneath your feet. There's a natural, almost instinctive urge to step in, to help God, to take the reins and force a different outcome when the divine timing feels impossibly slow. Think of the ancient story, Abraham and Sarah. Granted, they were promised something extraordinary, an heir, a lineage that would bless the world. Year after year, they waited. The promise remained, but Sarah's womb remained barren. The waiting became a heavy cloak, doubt a persistent whisper in the quiet corners of their home. It seemed logical, practical. If Sarah couldn't bear the child, perhaps her servant, Hagar, could be the vessel. It used the available resources, a seemingly clever workaround. It felt like doing something when God seemed to be doing nothing. But it wasn't God's plan. It was a human strategy born of impatience and a loss of faith in God's perfect, mysterious timing. And it brought not peace, but pain, not clarity, but complexity, not fulfillment of the true promise, but a generational tangle of conflict and heartache in the form of Ishmael. Their effort to help God actually complicated the path to the very blessing they longed for. This isn't just an old story etched in ancient scrolls. It's the mirror reflecting our own lives. How often do we see the promise, a stable job, a loving relationship, healing, a breakthrough, and when the waiting becomes unbearable, we start building our own Tower of Babel? We apply for jobs we know aren't right just to have something. We chase relationships born of loneliness, not divine connection. We cut corners, force doors open, manipulate situations, all in an effort to bypass the wilderness walk God intended, to arrive at the destination on our own schedule, using our own limited strength. Our human efforts, though they might feel like proactive faith, can sometimes be the very things that delay or complicate God's perfect plan. The striving born of faith's fatigue paradoxically blocks the flow of grace. His ways are so much higher than ours. His perspective spans eternities, and His timing is precise, even when it feels cruel in our finite view. The control you crave, meant to secure your future, can become the chain that binds you to unintended consequences. Pause now, right here, in the quiet space between the words. Are you trying to build your own tower? Are your hands busy trying to force a door open that God intends to unlock Himself? Surrender the blueprints you drew, the timelines you set. Trust the master architect. Trust his unfolding process, even when the construction site looks nothing like you imagined. His plans are always worth the wait. You feel the stillness pressing in, a silence that isn't peaceful but feels forgotten. You've been here a while, waiting, hoping, asking, and it seems the world has moved on while you remain rooted in place, watching your promised land recede into the haze of distance. This season, this long delay, feels less like a pause and more like a prison. Yet this is precisely the place God often chooses for His deepest work. Think of the wilderness, not just a barren landscape, but a divine classroom, a school designed specifically for lessons you can only learn away from the comforts, the distractions, the familiar landmarks of your expected destination. It's the backside of the desert where God takes you, not to abandon you, but to educate you. Remember Moses? 40 years, 40 long years tending sheep, a humble, hidden life after the grandeur of Pharaoh's palace. 40 years of obscurity, of dust, of silence, of waiting. It was there, in that vast, empty expanse, that God wasn't just preparing a leader for Israel. He was shaping a man in the wilderness. He was chipping away at the pride of the palace, deepening a dependence on His voice alone, forging a character resilient enough for the colossal task ahead. The waiting wasn't empty time. It was formative time. This wilderness isn't just a place you're waiting to leave. It's a place where God is working within you. He's using the quiet, the sharp edges of challenge, the frustrating delays, to refine you like precious metal in the fire. He's pruning away the branches that bear no fruit, not to diminish you, but to prepare you for a harvest you can't yet imagine. He's strengthening your inner man, building a resilience that feels impossible when the storms hit. He's teaching you to distinguish His whisper above the clamor of your fears and the noise of the world's expectations. This season isn't about a forgotten dream. It's about a deep, internal reconstruction. The blessing you are waiting for requires a vessel strong enough to carry its weight, and God is molding that vessel right here, in the wilderness. It's a season where less is often teaching you how to rely on more. Quietly ask Him, right now in this space, what are you teaching me here, in this wilderness? What character qualities are you trying to cultivate within me? Embrace the difficult lessons. They are the foundation of the strength you will need tomorrow. You watch the days blur into weeks, maybe even months, maybe years. You prayed. You poured out your heart. You took the steps you thought were right, and nothing changes. Or worse, things seem to get harder, less hopeful. The visible landscape of your life feels like a barren field, parched and silent, waiting for a rain that never falls. You feel forgotten, left in a state of spiritual or emotional winter, questioning if God even heard your plea, let alone plans to answer. This is the ache of the unseen season, the struggle when there are no outward signs of progress, only the persistent, quiet hum of waiting. But step back for a moment and consider the hidden places. Think of the towering oak tree, standing resolute through the winter frost. Its branches are bare, its form seems dormant, lifeless against the gray sky. There is no outward bloom, no visible growth pushing through the bark. Yet beneath the frozen, unyielding earth, a powerful, unseen work is happening. Its roots are not passive. They are actively pushing deeper, reaching further into the soil, anchoring the giant against storms to come, gathering the vital nutrients stored below the surface. The strength of the future tree, its ability to weather the wildest gales and bear abundant fruit, is being forged in this hidden, unseen realm. This is the quiet truth of your waiting season. While you may perceive only stillness or even regression on the surface, God is at work in depths you cannot see. He is the master sculptor, chipping away at unseen impurities in the marble of your character, shaping you in ways only He can perceive. The final form is not yet revealed. The masterpiece is not yet on display. But the essential, foundational work is happening relentlessly beneath the surface. He is not idle when you see no outward movement. He is deepening your roots of faith, strengthening your trust in His character, embedding you more firmly in the rich soil of His promises. This hidden growth is not a delay, it is preparation. It is making you resilient enough to stand firm when the breakthrough comes, wise enough to steward the fruit when it appears. The fear whispers, "Nothing is happening. You are stuck. God is not working." But faith declares, God's unseen work is just as real, just as vital, and often more foundational than the visible results I long for. It is a beautiful paradox. Sometimes the deepest growth happens when you feel most barren. He is building strength in stillness, refining faith in uncertainty. The lack of outward progress isn't a sign of God's absence, but often a sign of His intricate, subterranean construction project within you. Trust that He is doing significant work in the invisible realm, in your heart, in circumstances you're unaware of, in the lives of others connected to your situation. He is preparing the ground, strengthening the roots, ensuring that when the season changes, you are ready to receive the harvest He has planned. Rest in the assurance that His unseen hand is sovereign, purposeful, and always working for your good and His glory. The stone is cold beneath you, the air thick with the scent of damp earth. Or maybe it's the silence of a forgotten room, the weight of years pressing down. Imagine him there, Joseph, the dreamer, thrown into a pit, the bright coat torn, the promises echoing like cruel laughter from above. Betrayed by the ones who should have protected him, sold into slavery by the ones who should have loved him. The pit wasn't the end. It was just the terrifying beginning of a journey through depths he couldn't have imagined. You know this feeling, don't you? The shock of unexpected pain, the sting of betrayal, the moment life throws you into a hole you didn't dig. Years turn into a blurred landscape of servitude. Then comes the false accusation, the injustice that lands him in an Egyptian prison, not for a crime committed, but for righteousness upheld. Think of the lonely nights, the dreams of his youth seeming like a cruel, distant memory. The years in that cell stretched on, each sunrise a reminder that he was still captive, still forgotten by the world outside. Despair taps on the window of the soul, whispering that God has turned away, that the promises were just fantasy. But even in the stench and the solitude, God was with him, not rescuing him out immediately, but sustaining him in the darkness. God granted him favor, wisdom, the ability to interpret dreams, even among fellow prisoners. His waiting wasn't passive suffering, it was active faithfulness where he was planted. He served the jailer, he used his gifts. trusting that even here life had purpose. Joseph's path from that pit to the palace wasn't a straight, easy line. It was a winding road, marked by delays, setbacks, and heartbreaks. What looked like roadblocks were, in the divine economy, setups. Every unfair moment, every forgotten year in prison was strategically positioning him, refining him, preparing him for a destiny far grander than the boyhood dreams he once shared. This is the profound, often painful truth of Romans 8:28 unfolding before our eyes. God works all things, even the deepest betrayals, the longest waits, the most crushing injustices, together for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. The pit was preparation. The prison was positioning. His spiritual insight deepens here. God can use even your most painful and unfair periods of waiting, these hidden seasons, to build in you what is needed and to position you for a future you cannot yet see. See your current trials, your frustrating delays, not just as roadblocks, but as potential building blocks in God's larger redemptive story for your life. The very things that seem to hinder you might be shaping you, teaching you, making you ready. Trust that He is working quietly, powerfully, strategically, even in the dark, silent prison cells of your own waiting season. Trust that your story, like Joseph's, is being written by an author who specializes in dramatic, divine reversals. She checks the clock again. Minutes tick by. Then hours. Then days bleed into weeks. And still, the answer hasn't come. The promise feels distant, a fading echo against the persistent hum of her own anxieties. Maybe it was just hope, a fragile thing she shouldn't have clung to so tightly. Doubt whispers, insidious and quiet, asking if God even heard, if He even cares about the when. It's a familiar valley, isn't it? The waiting room of faith, where our human concept of time confronts the vast, incomprehensible patience of the divine. We live by seconds, by deadlines, by sunrises and sunsets that measure our earthly journeys. Our calendars dictate our stress, our watches our impatience, but His calendar is not bound by the spinning of this planet. With the Lord, says the ancient wisdom, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. 2 Peter 3:8. This isn't just a poetic metaphor. It's a profound truth that reorients everything. From God's eternal vantage point, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, held simultaneously in His gaze, what feels to us like an agonizing delay is simply the next perfect thread being woven into a cosmic tapestry. Imagine standing nose to fabric with a complex, intricate work of art, seeing only a tangle of disparate threads on the back. It seems chaotic, messy, without form or purpose. That's often how we see our lives in the waiting. But God sees the front of the tapestry. He sees the stunning pattern unfolding, the colors mingling in precise harmony, the design taking shape with breathtaking intentionality. What looks like a delay from our limited perspective is, from His infinite view, the necessary unfolding of His perfect plan in its perfect sequence. He is never operating on our timeline. He is operating on His own, governed by eternal wisdom, perfect knowledge of every variable, and His ultimate, glorious purposes for your life and the world. Your impatience does not dictate His pace. Your fear does not accelerate His process. He is working on a different clock entirely, with a perspective that encompasses past, present, and future in one divine glance. The spiritual insight here is not to become passive in the waiting, but to become rooted in the understanding that the timetable setter is infinitely wiser and more loving than the one anxiously glancing at her watch. Perhaps the deepest surrender isn't just giving him the problem, but giving him the clock. Release the death grip on your human timeline. Surrender your desperate need to understand the when, and rest, truly rest, in the assurance of his perfect wisdom guiding every moment. He is never late. He is simply working on a canvas we cannot yet fully comprehend, creating beauty in the waiting, weaving a story far grander than we could ever orchestrate ourselves. Trust the timetable setter, not your watch. You sit in the stillness of the room, the quiet pressing in, and wonder if the silence outside is just a reflection of the silence you feel within. You've waited. Patiently, you thought. You've prayed the prayers that felt like whispers carried on the wind, and the prayers that felt like shouts against a closed door. You've searched the horizon for a sign, scanned the skies for a breakthrough, longed for a flicker of light in the gathering dusk. But the darkness persists. Circumstance remains unchanged. The promise you cling to feels fragile, distant, like a forgotten echo in an empty canyon. You wonder if God is even there, or if he heard, or if he simply doesn't care. The weight of what you don't see presses down, heavier than stone. This is the landscape of faith's deepest challenge, trusting when you don't see. It's the wilderness walk where the path ahead is hidden by fog, the storm-tossed sea where the shore has vanished from sight. Faith, you are learning in this raw, honest moment, is not about having all the answers laid out before you, clear as day. It's not about feeling God's presence like a warm blanket or seeing his hand moving in undeniable ways. True, radical faith is about leaning your full weight, every tired ounce of your being, on the unwavering character of God himself, even when everything around you screams the opposite. Even when your circumstances feel like a cruel contradiction to his promises. Even when his presence feels frustratingly, agonizingly absent. Think of Job, the man who had everything. Wealth beyond measure, a thriving family, health that allowed him to prosper, and lost it all. Overnight, he was stripped bare, left in the ashes, grieving his children, battling agonizing physical pain, misunderstood by his closest friends. He sat there, wrestling with the unimaginable, trying to reconcile his suffering with everything he understood about a just and good God. His world was a stark, brutal contradiction to divine favor. He saw devastation, pain, loss, and silence from the heavens. His feelings were raw grief, confusion, and despair. Yet, in the very depths of his agony, scraping hope from the bottom of the barrel, he declared something breathtakingly radical. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job 13:15. He chose trust even when understanding completely eluded him. He didn't feel God's goodness in that moment. He didn't see God's plan unfolding, but he declared his trust in God, despite God's actions or perceived inaction towards him. Waiting often demands this kind of radical trust. It asks you to trust God's inherent goodness when life feels profoundly bad, perhaps worse than it ever has. It requires you to trust his plan when it makes absolutely no sense, when the steps you are taking feel like walking backward or simply standing still while the world rushes past. It compels you to trust his love when you feel utterly abandoned, left alone in the dark with your fears and your unanswered questions. This is where faith isn't a feeling or a visible outcome. It's a fierce, defiant posture of the heart, a choice made in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. It's the seed buried in the earth, trusting in the unseen sun and unseen water to bring forth life. It's trusting the hand you cannot see, simply because you know the heart that holds it. The profound spiritual insight here is this: true faith is not, and has never been, dependent on favorable circumstances or clear, immediate answers. It is singularly and utterly dependent on the unwavering reliability, the steadfast faithfulness, and the unchanging nature of God Himself. Your feelings will fluctuate like the tides. Your circumstances will shift like the desert sands. But God remains the same. He is who He says He is: faithful, good, sovereign, loving, just. And He will do what He has promised, in His time, in His way. Faith is the active choice to believe this foundational truth, to lean your entire being on His character, regardless of the weight, regardless of what your eyes see, what your heart feels, or what your mind can comprehend in the present moment. Perhaps you feel that distance now, that chilling gap between what your situation looks like and what God's promises say. That is the very space where faith is strengthened. It is forged in the fire of unknowing, refined in the waiting room of unanswered prayer. Your call to reflection right here, right now, is to make a conscious, audible declaration of trust in God, just as Job did. Even if your feelings are screaming doubt, even if your mind is racing with anxiety, speak His promises over your situation. Speak truth into the face of fear. Declare, God, I don't see it, but I trust You. I don't understand it, but I lean on You. My feelings are here, but my faith is in You. It is in this declaration, this act of choosing belief over sight, that the muscle of faith grows strong. The wind may still tap at the window, but now it sounds less like a whisper and more like an invitation to trust the One who works in the unseen, who builds His kingdom in the quiet places of waiting hearts. Faith is strengthened in the gap between what you see and what you choose to believe about the God who holds it all. The silence stretches on. Days bleed into weeks, maybe months, maybe even years, and the answer you begged for, the breakthrough you longed for, the change you desperately needed still hasn't arrived. You sit in this quiet space, feeling suspended, wondering if your prayer was even heard, if your hope was misplaced. The uncertainty feels heavy, like a thick fog settling over your spirit. Waiting feels like a form of gentle torture, a passive endurance of a delay you didn't choose. Your mind races with what-ifs and why-nots, replaying the moments, searching for a reason for the prolonged pause. This season feels less like a sacred pause and more like a stagnant pool, still and lifeless. You feel the familiar tug of anxiety, the whisper of doubt, asking if God has forgotten you in this waiting room. But Scripture whispers a different truth. The psalmist doesn't just tell you to wait. He says, "Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, and He shall strengthen your heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord." Psalm 27:14. This isn't a call to passive paralysis. It's an invitation to active, intentional engagement with God in the waiting. It's a declaration that waiting isn't about weakness, but about cultivating strength, not despite the delay, but through it. The strength He promises isn't just for the end of the wait, but for the journey itself. This waiting isn't a punishment. It is preparation. It is the hidden season where roots deepen before the visible growth appears. You are not merely enduring, you are becoming. This active waiting takes shape in specific disciplines. It means staying rooted in God's Word, allowing His unchanging truth to be the anchor in a shifting season. His promises are not put on pause just because your circumstances are. It means maintaining a posture of prayer, not just presenting petitions, but continuing the conversation, listening in the quiet, trusting that even when answers are slow, His presence is immediate. Prayer in the waiting isn't always about getting your way. It's about aligning your heart with His. It means engaging in worship, intentionally shifting your focus from the crushing weight of your problems to the immense glory and faithfulness of God. Worship is declaration in the face of delay, and it means serving others, keeping your heart and hands outward focused, preventing the waiting from consuming you entirely with your own unmet needs. In pouring out, you find yourself refilled. The waiting room is not a holding pen where life ceases. It is a training ground and a place for active faith to flourish. It is an opportunity to deepen your intimacy with God, to strengthen those spiritual muscles you didn't know you had, and to prepare your heart for what is to come, often in ways you couldn't have anticipated. You are not just waiting for something, you are waiting with someone. This season, seemingly a period of delay, is actually a divine invitation, an invitation to trust Him, not just for the outcome, but for the process. An invitation to find Him, not just at the destination, but in the journey through the wilderness. Consider this: what intentional actions can you choose today to actively wait on the Lord? How can you use this time, which feels like mere delay, to draw closer to Him and serve others, rather than simply enduring the quiet, the stillness, the unknown? The delay is not the end of your story. It is a sacred chapter in the unfolding narrative He is writing. You sit in the quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in like a heavy cloak. It's not the quiet of peace or rest, but the quiet of unanswered questions echoing in the empty space where the reply should be. You've poured out your heart, laid bare your fears, pleaded for a sign, for a word, for anything. And the silence answers. It's a silence that feels like absence, like distance, like perhaps your voice doesn't carry beyond the ceiling fan or the rustling leaves outside your window. Doubt, that familiar serpent, whispers its poison. Has He heard? Does He care? Has He forgotten? The waiting stretches out, not just in days or weeks, but in the slow, heavy beat of your heart, marking time you didn't expect to spend in this wilderness of uncertainty. You look at the mountains of your problems, the valleys of your fears, and the river of your tears seems to be the only constant flow. But here is a truth so profound, it can reshape the very landscape of your waiting. God is not distant or silent in your waiting. He is profoundly, intimately present in the waiting itself. The silence isn't His absence. It's often the very space where He is doing His deepest, most unseen work within you. He is Emmanuel, God with us. This isn't a title reserved for a baby in a manger or a king on a throne. It's a reality for you, right here, right now. He is with you in the quiet moments of doubt that threaten to unravel your faith. He is with you in the hot, stinging tears of disappointment that fall onto your pillow. He is with you in the weary sigh that escapes your lips when the strength you thought you had finally gives way. His presence is not a reward for the breakthrough, it is the sustenance in the struggle. Think of the disciples after Jesus ascended. They were instructed to wait in Jerusalem for the promised Holy Spirit. An upper room became their sanctuary, their waiting room. Imagine the mix of emotions: profound loss, confusion about the future, obedience to a command they didn't fully understand, mingled with anticipation of a promise they couldn't yet grasp. It was a time of intense uncertainty and waiting. Jesus was physically gone, but he hadn't left them alone. His promise echoed in their hearts, and his presence was with them in spirit, ministering to their fear and uncertainty long before the dramatic wind and fire outpouring at Pentecost. Their waiting wasn't empty. It was filled with his unseen presence, strengthening their bonds, preparing their hearts, tuning their spiritual ears to the frequency of the divine. The spiritual insight here is radiant and transformative. Waiting on God is not merely a passive state you endure until he acts. It is an active posture of faith designed for you to experience God more deeply right where you are. It's about learning to sense his presence, not just in the dramatic breakthrough that changes everything, but in the mundane, the difficult, the uncertain rhythms of daily life in the wait. It's in the quiet consistency of his grace, the subtle nudge of his comfort, the gentle influx of his strength that meets you in your weakness. His comfort isn't waiting for the storm to pass. It's available to you in the storm. His peace isn't just found on the mountaintop. It descends into the valley floor with you. His strength doesn't arrive only when you see the victory. It is the power that holds you upright in the battle. Sometimes his presence is the very silence you perceive. He is not silent because he is absent. He is sometimes silent so you will learn to hear him in a new way, in the language of your heart, in the quiet whisper of his spirit, rather than the loud trumpet of your expectations. The greatest miracle might not be the answer to your prayer, but the discovery of God's unwavering closeness while you wait for it. This season, often perceived as a pause in your life story, is a chapter rich with his presence if you have eyes to see and ears to hear. Your call to reflection today, in this quiet, waiting moment, tune your spiritual senses to his presence. Shift your focus from the perceived absence of an answer to the tangible reality of his being with you. Acknowledge that he is here in this very moment, in this specific circumstance, with all its ache and uncertainty. Don't just wait for him, wait with him. Ask him, quietly, sincerely, to reveal his presence to you in new ways, even and especially in the quiet, in the struggle, in the unanswered space. He is closer than you think, closer than your doubt allows you to feel. He is Emmanuel here now, inviting you to simply be with him. The calendar pages stick together, each one a silent testament to time passing without the answer you've longed for. You feel the pressure mount, the weight of unanswered questions, the heat of uncertainty about when or even if. It's easy to see this season of waiting as empty space, a barren stretch in your story. But what if this isn't merely time passing, but a divine process unfolding? Like the alchemist's fire, this waiting room isn't a place of abandonment, but a crucible. Here, in the intense heat of delay and discomfort, God is at work, refining. He holds you in the flames, not to destroy you, but to purify. Just as gold must pass through intense heat to burn away the impurities, the dross that diminishes its value, so too must your faith. The fire of waiting burns away the self-reliance that says you can orchestrate your own timeline, the impatience that chafes against God's perfect timing, and the misplaced trust that rests on human efforts rather than divine promises. It's uncomfortable, yes. This surrender of control feels like a loss. But in this sacred friction, you discover the resilience of a faith that no longer depends on favorable circumstances, but on the unwavering character of God Himself. This isn't arbitrary hardship. It's a deliberate act of love by the Master Refiner. This season isn't punishment for something you did wrong. It is preparation for something God is doing right. The purpose of the delay is intricately linked to the purpose of the promise. God doesn't just want to give you the blessing. He wants you to be the person who can steward that blessing for His glory. He is making you ready for the weight and responsibility that the promise carries. Think of a young tree. If it bears too much fruit too soon, its shallow roots cannot support the load, and it breaks. God is using this waiting season to deepen your roots, ensuring your character is aligned with the calling He has placed upon your life, making you strong enough to bear the fruit He intends you to yield. In the pressure, resilience is forged. In the stillness, roots grow deep. Look at the pressure not as opposition, but as divine refinement. Ask God, right now, in the quiet of your heart, what dross He is seeking to burn away in you during this time. What self-reliance, what impatience, what fear is He inviting you to surrender? Cooperate with His transformative work. Embrace the heat of the furnace. It is making you more valuable, more resilient, more capable of carrying the very promise you are waiting for. The silence stretches thin, a vast, empty canvas where the echoes of your prayers seem to fade without response. Each sunrise feels like another page turned in the same chapter of waiting, and the hope that once burned brightly sometimes flickers like a fragile candle in the wind of doubt. You look at the calendar, mark the anniversaries of the longing, the need, the unanswered plea, and a quiet ache settles in your chest. Has God forgotten? Does He see the impossibility of this situation? The sheer stubbornness of the mountain that refuses to move? This waiting feels less like a sacred pause and more like a spiritual desert, barren and unending. You are not alone in this parched place. The heart's deepest fears whisper their doubts in the stillness. Will the breakthrough ever come? Or is this delay a quiet, sorrowful no I haven't yet accepted? But here, in the heart of the long wait, lies a truth as ancient and immovable as the mountains themselves. God is faithful, absolutely, undeniably faithful. The breakthrough will come. It might not arrive on your timetable, or even when logic says it's still possible, but it will arrive precisely when His perfect plan dictates. Think of Sarah, her womb barren, her youth long gone, facing the biological impossibility of bearing a child. Year after year, the promise seemed more like a cruel jest. Yet in her old age, long after the world had written off the possibility, Isaac was born, a miracle wrapped in divine timing, a testament that God laughs at impossibility and keeps His promises against all odds. The breakthrough for Sarah didn't come when she was fertile or young. It came when it was unmistakably clear that this was God's doing, bringing Him maximum glory. Consider another story etched into the fabric of divine intervention, the crossing of the Red Sea. Generations endured slavery in Egypt. Months passed with escalating plagues. Finally, freedom seemed within grasp. Yet they found themselves trapped between the pursuing Egyptian army and the impassable waters. It was the ultimate dead end. Humanly speaking, there was nowhere to go, no hope of escape. The breakthrough came not when Pharaoh was distracted or when they had a head start, but at the very moment the enemy was closing in, ready to strike. God's deliverance arrived, not according to Pharaoh's schedule, nor Israel's fear, but according to his divine timetable. He opened a path through the impossible, revealing his power, not just to save his people, but to utterly defeat their oppressors in a way that left no doubt about his supreme authority. The breakthrough wasn't just escape, it was a demonstration of divine might at the 11th hour. This is the spiritual insight woven into the fabric of the universe. God's timing is not merely perfect, it is often orchestrated in a way that brings him the most glory and reveals his power most clearly. The longer the wait, the more impossible the situation seems, the greater the testimony to his faithfulness when the answer finally arrives. Sometimes the purpose of the delay is not to withhold, but to prepare the stage for a grander reveal of his character. It's in the deepest part of the valley that the light of dawn is most stunning. It's after the longest drought that the rain feels most like a miracle. Your waiting season isn't empty time. It's sacred ground where God is writing his story, refining your faith, and preparing you for the breakthrough that will give him maximum glory. Anchor your hope, then, not in the shifting sands of circumstances or the dwindling reservoirs of your own strength, but firmly in the unshakable truth of God's faithfulness. Hold on to the promise spoken through Paul. He who calls you is faithful. He will surely do it. 1 Thessalonians 5:24. This isn't a conditional statement. It's a declaration of divine resolve. He who initiated the promise, who called you into this journey, is faithful not only to begin it, but to bring it to completion. He will bring it to pass. Not a moment too soon, potentially to preserve a greater lesson or prepare a grander stage, and not a moment too late for his perfect plan to unfold, revealing his power in ways that could never have been seen had the answer arrived any earlier. Your breakthrough is coming, orchestrated for his glory on his divine timetable. Trust the author. Even when you can't yet see the final chapter, you sit in the quiet space of anticipation, the ache of waiting a dull throb in your chest. Perhaps you're waiting for a door to open, a season to shift, a word to come, or a healing to manifest. It feels like being suspended between 2 points, holding your breath, scanning the horizon for a sign. This state, this tension between what you know is true and what you don't yet see fully realized, is not an error in your spiritual journey. It is, in fact, its very rhythm. You are living right here, right now, in the profound reality of the already but not yet. Think of it. You have already been called out of darkness into his marvelous light. You have already been given the indescribable gift of the Holy Spirit, a down payment, a seal, the very presence of God residing within you, a promise whispered into the core of your being that you belong to him forever. You are already adopted as a child of God, inheritor of a kingdom, citizen of heaven, clothed in righteousness not your own. A victory over sin and death has already been won on the cross, echoing through eternity. These aren't distant hopes. They are established realities. The foundation beneath your feet, even when the ground feels shaky. This is the glorious already of your faith. the anchor holding firm in unseen waters. But the world outside your window, and perhaps even the landscape within your own heart, still bears the scars of the not yet. Suffering persists. Injustice lingers. Relationships are broken. Sickness touches lives. And your specific personal circumstance, that thing you're waiting on, praying desperately about, remains unresolved. The fullness of God's kingdom, where every tear is wiped away and all things are made new, hasn't fully arrived. We haven't seen the final redemption, the complete absence of pain, the perfect harmony of creation. We groan, the scriptures say, along with creation itself, as we await the final adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Your personal waiting, then, is not an isolated incident of God's delay concerning you. It is a specific, deeply felt participation in this grand cosmic narrative of the already but not yet that God is sovereignly weaving through history. It is the tension between the seed planted and the harvest yet to come, between the dawn broken and the full light of day, between the battle won and the final enemy put under his feet. It's a paradox. You possess everything essential in Christ now, yet you still wait for everything to be made visibly, undeniably new. Find peace in knowing you are not alone in this space of hopeful anticipation. Every believer, from the apostles onward, has walked this path, pilgrims whose true home is elsewhere, yet who walk faithfully on the earth today. Your wait is part of this universal experience, a testament to the truth that God's plan unfolds on a timeline far grander than our own, culminating in a glory that will make every moment of waiting worthwhile. Look to the already, all that He is, all that He has done, all that He has guaranteed you in Christ, and let the certainty of those completed works strengthen your heart for the not yet, trusting the same faithful hand that secured the promises will surely bring about their ultimate fulfillment in your life and in His world. The weary sigh escapes your lips. Another day ticks by, and the answer you're aching for remains just over the horizon. You feel the pressure mount, the quiet ache of unanswered questions, the gnawing uncertainty of what's next. This isn't just passive waiting. It feels like a slow, grinding kind of suffering, a wilderness season where the promised land seems impossibly far away. You wonder if you have the strength to keep putting one foot in front of the other when the landscape looks so bleak. But look closer at the soil of this difficult season. The Scripture reveals a profound truth. This waiting, this pressure, this wilderness isn't wasted ground. Romans 5:3-5 paints a picture not of despairing suffering, but of divine alchemy. It tells us that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. The very weight you feel isn't meant to crush you, but to refine you. Waiting, surrendered into God's hands, becomes a crucible where precious spiritual fruit begins to form. It's the process of developing a quiet, unyielding strength you didn't know you had. Perseverance. This perseverance isn't stubbornness. It's a resilient faith that learns to stand firm even when the storm rages around you. And from that steady stance, something beautiful emerges. Character. Christ-like character. Patience that wasn't there before. Compassion born from understanding your own vulnerability. Wisdom gleaned from lessons learned in the dark. Like roots, digging deeper for water during a drought, your spirit grows stronger and more rooted in His truth. And this character, this refined self, anchors a hope that doesn't waver with the wind of changing circumstances. This hope isn't a flimsy wish. It's a certainty that does not put us to shame, because its foundation is not your own strength or the outcome you desire, but the God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit. This hope looks past the immediate struggle and sees the unchanging heart of God, the author who is writing your story. Think back to the previous valleys you navigated, the moments of waiting, the seasons of quiet struggle. How did they shape the person you are today? What resilience did you gain? What compassion was awakened? Often, the strength you needed for the waiting and the wisdom you learned in the waiting proved more valuable and lasting than the very thing you were waiting for. This reveals a sacred paradox. Sometimes, the greatest gain is found not in the arrival, but in the journey itself. God values the process of your becoming as much, perhaps more, than the immediate outcome you seek, because the process is sculpting you, day by day, into the image of His Son. So pause now. Look honestly at this season of waiting you are in. Can you begin to see the subtle, perhaps hidden, fruit God is cultivating within your soul? See the perseverance being forged, the character being refined, the hope being anchored more deeply in His love than ever before. Ask Him for the grace to embrace this process, not just endure it. Ask Him to open your eyes to the quiet work He is doing within you. Trust that even in the stillness, even in the ache, something beautiful and lasting is being produced. A hope that, because it is rooted in Him, will never, ever disappoint. You sit in the quiet, the echoes of unanswered prayers still lingering like a phantom ache in your soul. The waiting room has stretched on, seasons bleeding into each other, and sometimes, just sometimes, you wonder if you were forgotten on the journey. You've scanned the horizon for signs, strained to hear the trumpet blast of breakthrough, yet the silence persists, a vast, often intimidating ocean between your hope and its fulfillment. Maybe the deepest fear isn't that God won't act, but that in the long, drawn-out interim, He isn't even here. The weight of that thought can crush the spirit more surely than any unmet need. You clutch the edge of the chair, breath held tight, searching for evidence of His nearness in the ordinary, the mundane, the unchanging landscape of your present. But God whispers not in the storm you anticipated, but in the stillness you resisted. The truth that anchors the soul, as this waiting journey concludes, isn't merely the promise of a future rescue, but the certainty of a present, unwavering presence. He isn't just the God who will meet you at the finish line. He is the God who is with you in every single step of the race. The silence you perceive isn't evidence of His absence. It might be the very sound of His presence, calling you deeper into a trust that doesn't demand noise or drama, but simply rests in His companionship. Think of the Good Shepherd, not just preparing a table in the presence of your enemies, a future promise, but walking through the valley of the shadow of death, a present reality. Psalm 23:4. His staff and His rod, instruments of comfort and guidance, are right there, even when darkness presses in. He made an ancient, unshakable vow: I will never leave you nor forsake you. Hebrews 13:5. Not I might pop in when things get bad, or I'll be there if you pass the test, but a steadfast, eternal never. The immense burden of waiting, of trying to decipher God's plans, of striving to conjure outcomes, begins to soften when you shift your gaze. It's like looking at a masterpiece. If you focus only on the small, unfinished corner, you miss the grandeur of the whole. When you shift your focus from the unmet desire, the empty space, the still closed door, to the ever-present God who holds you gently within the uncertainty, something fundamental changes. He is not idle in your waiting. He is diligently, meticulously, beautifully building something within you and around you. It's a work often hidden, unseen, like roots deepening in the soil before the flower blooms. It happens root by root, moment by moment, faith step by faith step. His timing is perfect, not because it aligns with your carefully laid out plans and deadlines, but because it aligns with His infinite love, His perfect wisdom, and His grand overarching purpose, a purpose far more magnificent than your current request might encompass. So here, in this quiet space, breathe deeply. Inhale His peace. Exhale the anxiety that has held you captive. Release the tight, white-knuckled grip on the reins of your life. The heavy burden of trying to figure it all out, to predict, to control. Your intrinsic worth, your value in the universe, is not tied to the arrival of your breakthrough, the granting of your petition, the moment the light finally shines on your path. Your worth is irrevocably, eternally tied to your identity as His beloved child. You were chosen, redeemed, cherished, simply because He is love and you are His. You are seen, even in the most hidden moments. You are heard, even when the silence seems deafening. You are held, cradled in the strong, loving arms of the One who knows your name, knows your pain, and knows the path forward. Rest in the quiet confidence that even in the stillness, even in the uncertainty, His grace is profoundly sufficient for every single moment. His strength is made perfect precisely in your weakness, not in spite of it. And His loving presence, closer than your own breath, sings a song of hope, resilience, and deep belonging over your weary soul. The waiting may continue. The path forward may still be veiled. But you do not, cannot, wait alone. You wait with Him. And in that, you are never, ever truly waiting in vain. They didn't see the end, but they trusted the author. And that was enough.